The human ship Aurora Dawn entered orbit above the planet Virelia, a shining jewel of silver clouds and blue forests. Captain Elias Ward, Earth's youngest diplomat, stood quietly by the viewport, watching the alien world grow larger beneath them. He had read reports, seen pictures, and studied Virelian culture for years, but none of it could have prepared him for this moment. Humanity was new to the galactic community. For centuries, the stars had seemed unreachable, but after first contact 5 years ago, everything had changed. The Virelian Empire had invited Earth to a grand diplomatic gathering. And now, Elias was to represent all of humanity at the royal court itself. The Virelians were famous for two things: their beauty and their telepathic abilities. Their aura, visible like a faint glow around their skin, reflected the strength of their minds. The brighter the light, the stronger their telepathic bond. To them, physical appearance and inner radiance were one and the same. Humans, by contrast, were still new, still rough-edged and unpredictable. As the ship landed on a wide platform surrounded by tall, crystalline towers, Elias felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The hatch opened, and a group of tall, slender Virelians stepped forward. Their skin shimmered faintly under the sunlight, some blue, some silver, some gold. At the front stood a royal guard, his expression unreadable. "Captain Elias Ward of Earth," he said, bowing slightly. "The royal court welcomes you to Virelia. His Majesty awaits." Elias nodded and stepped forward. "Thank you. It's an honor." He followed them through halls that seemed alive, walls of glowing vines, air filled with the soft hum of energy. Everything around him was beautiful, almost too perfect. The scent of strange flowers drifted through the corridors, and the sound of distant singing echoed like a dream. Finally, they reached a great hall with a high domed ceiling of glass that revealed the endless stars above. The royal family stood upon a raised dais, surrounded by courtiers dressed in flowing silks that shimmered like liquid light. And there she was, Princess Lyra. She stood at the center, radiant beyond imagination. Her hair glowed like strands of sunlight, and her aura shimmered golden around her. Every eye in the hall was drawn to her. When she smiled, even the guards seemed to forget to breathe. Lyra was the most admired being in the Empire, the living symbol of perfection. Elias felt dozens of alien eyes on him, measuring him, judging his every move. He knew what they saw: a human with plain brown hair, no aura, no telepathic presence. To them he was a curiosity at best, a lesser creature at worst. But Elias didn't mind. He had come to represent humanity with dignity, not pride. The king spoke, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "Captain Ward, welcome. You stand before the royal bloodline of Virelia. You will speak for your world, and through you our alliance may begin." Elias bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, it's my honor to be here. Humanity seeks peace and friendship with your people. We believe both our worlds can learn from each other." The king nodded slightly. "We shall see." Then he gestured toward the royal daughters. "As part of this new accord, it has been proposed that a representative bond be formed, a symbolic partnership between our species. You may choose among my daughters to stand beside you in the new alliance. Each represents a path for our future cooperation." Elias froze for a moment. He had been told about this custom, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Still, he kept calm and looked up at the dais. Princess Lyra stepped forward gracefully, her golden aura flaring brighter as she smiled. "I would be honored, Captain," she said. Her voice was soft but carried through the hall like music. She was everything her reputation promised: confident, beautiful, perfect. But as Elias's eyes moved across the dais, he noticed someone else standing quietly behind the others. A young woman, shorter than the rest, with silver eyes that seemed to hold distant stars within them. Her aura was faint, barely a soft blue light compared to Lyra's brilliance. She stood with her hands folded, her gaze lowered, almost as if she wished to disappear. The courtiers didn't look at her. In fact, they seemed to pretend she wasn't even there. Elias turned slightly to the Virelian guide beside him. "Who is she?" The guide hesitated. "That is Princess Sarah, the youngest. Her aura is weak, her bond unstable. She is not considered fit for public representation." "Not fit," Elias repeated quietly. "Why?" "She lacks the mental resonance of her sisters," the guide said carefully. "Among our kind, such weaknesses." "Where?" Elias looked at her again. There was something in her stillness, a quiet strength, maybe sadness but not weakness. She didn't radiate power like Lyra did, yet her presence was gentle, calm, and strangely human. The king's voice broke the silence. "Captain Ward, the choice is yours. Which daughter of Virelia will you stand beside in this alliance?" Everyone in the hall leaned forward. It was obvious who they expected him to choose. Lyra was perfection. She represented glory and power. Choosing her would please the court, maybe even make humanity look strong. But as Elias looked between them, his decision became clear. He stepped forward slowly, his boots echoing across the polished floor. He stopped not before Lyra, but before the one in the back. Gasps filled the hall. Elias bowed slightly to the quiet princess. "If she is willing," he said clearly, "I choose Princess Sarah." Silence fell like a stone. The king's eyes widened. Lyra's perfect smile froze, disbelief written across her face. Courtiers whispered in confusion and shock. Sarah herself looked startled. She lifted her gaze for the first time, meeting Elias's eyes. For a long moment she just stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Me?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Elias smiled kindly. "Yes, you," the king frowned, his tone low. "Captain Ward, are you certain?" "You may choose again. The galaxy will not understand such a decision." "I am certain," Elias replied calmly. "Humans have a saying, light is not always truth. Sometimes what shines less holds deeper meaning." The hall erupted into murmurs. Some were amused, some offended, and some simply confused. But Elias stood firm. He didn't care about their expectations or their beauty standards. To him, Sarah looked more real than anyone else in that shining hall. Sarah hesitated, looking to her father for permission. The king's expression softened slightly, though confusion still flickered in his eyes. "If that is your choice, human," he said, "so be it. Princess Sarah will represent Virelia in this alliance." A faint sound escaped Lyra, half disbelief, half anger. But she said nothing. Her golden aura dimmed ever so slightly. Sarah stepped forward, her steps uncertain but graceful. When she stood beside Elias, he noticed her hands trembling. He gave a small reassuring smile. "You don't have to be nervous," he said softly. She looked up, meeting his eyes again. "I am not nervous," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "I just do not understand. No one has ever chosen me?" Elias chuckled lightly. "Then maybe it's time someone did." For the first time, Sarah smiled. Small, shy, but genuine. The ceremony continued awkwardly, but something had shifted in that hall. For centuries, the Virelians had measured worth by light and power. Yet in one moment, a human, plain, auraless, and stubborn, had broken their unspoken rule. Outside, the sky of Virelia shimmered with two moons rising together. The crowd began to disperse, whispering tales of the strange human who had chosen the dim princess. And as Elias walked beside Sarah through the garden corridors that night, he noticed something subtle. The soft blue glow around her had grown just a little brighter. News of Captain Elias Ward's choice spread faster than light. Across Virelia's shining cities and the distant colonies of the Empire, everyone was talking about the strange human who had chosen the dim princess. In the capital, the nobles whispered behind jeweled masks. Some laughed. Some called it a scandal. Others said it was a sign of human foolishness. But for Elias, it was just another morning on a world that still didn't understand him. He stood by a window in the guest wing of the royal palace, staring at the sunrise. The light here was different, soft blue and gold, the kind that made everything seem unreal. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his thoughts. He knew his decision had caused confusion and anger among the Virelians, but he didn't regret it. He had followed his instinct, and that instinct told him that Princess Sarah was more than what others saw. The door opened quietly behind him. "Captain Ward," said a gentle voice. He turned and saw Princess Sarah standing there. She wore a simple white gown, unlike the glowing dresses of her sisters. Her aura shimmered faintly like moonlight seen through water. "Good morning, Princess," Elias said with a polite bow. "You may call me Sarah," she said softly. "I think, if we are to work together, we should not be strangers." Elias smiled. "Then you must call me Elias." She hesitated, then nodded. "Elias," she repeated, the word sounding strange but pleasant in her voice. They sat near the wide glass balcony, where strange birds with silver feathers flew between crystal trees. For a while neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was peaceful, like the world itself was still waking up. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You caused quite a storm yesterday," she said quietly. "I've noticed," Elias said with a small smile. "I seem to have broken some traditions." "More than you realize," she said. "No outsider has ever been allowed to choose among the royal family. And even then, none would have chosen me." Elias turned to look at her. "Why do you say that?" She looked down, her fingers twisting the fabric of her gown. "Because I am different. My aura is weak. My telepathic link unstable. Among my people, strength of mind and beauty of aura are everything. I have neither." Elias leaned forward slightly. "On Earth, we believe everyone has strength. Sometimes it's not the kind others see, but it's there." Sarah gave a soft, sad smile. "That is a very human thing to say." He chuckled. "Maybe, but I believe it's true." They talked for a while, about Earth, about the stars, about the strange ways their worlds differed. Sarah was curious about everything. How humans lived without telepathy, how they built their cities, how they survived wars and disasters without shared minds. "You live with such chaos," she said, eyes wide. "How do you keep peace if you cannot feel each other's thoughts?" Elias looked out at the sky. "We don't always keep peace," he admitted. "But maybe that's what makes peace valuable. We earn it the hard way." Sarah thought about his words for a moment, then nodded. "That is strangely beautiful." Later that day, they walked together through the Hall of Stars where glowing symbols floated in midair, representations of every world allied with Virelia. Each symbol pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Elias stopped before one that represented Earth, a simple blue and white sphere freshly added to the collection. "We're small compared to the others," he said. Sarah shook her head. "Size does not matter. Every light adds to the sky." As they spoke, a group of nobles passed nearby, their voices sharp and mocking. "Look," one whispered loudly. "The human and the dim one. What a perfect match." Another laughed softly. "Perhaps she shines brighter near primitive minds." Elias heard every word. Sarah lowered her eyes, pretending not to notice, but Elias could see her hands trembling slightly. He turned calmly toward the nobles. "On my world," he said, his voice even but firm, "we teach our children that true strength is how you treat those weaker than you. Perhaps you should try that lesson." The nobles froze, their faces pale, then hurried away without another word. When they were gone, Sarah looked at him, surprised. "You didn't have to say that." "Yes, I did," Elias said. "Because they were wrong." For a moment she simply looked at him, speechless. No one had ever defended her before. Not like that. That evening, the king called Elias to a private meeting. The grand chamber was filled with soft golden light and the scent of burning crystal incense. The king sat upon his throne, his expression unreadable. "Captain Ward," he began, "you have created an unusual situation." Elias bowed respectfully. "If I have offended your majesty, that was not my intent." The king studied him for a moment. "You have not offended, but you have confused many. Our people value light. You chose one who has little of it." Elias met his gaze calmly. "On Earth, we've learned that light can be deceiving. Sometimes the brightest glow hides the darkest heart." The king's lips curved slightly, a hint of amusement or curiosity. "And you believe my daughter Sarah has a heart worth trusting?" "Yes," Elias said without hesitation. "I see honesty in her. And courage. That's enough for me." For a moment the king was silent. Then he leaned back and said, "Perhaps humans see things differently for a reason. We shall see if your instincts are right." As the days passed, Sarah and Elias spent more time together. They were assigned to study trade routes, political treaties, and technology exchange agreements between their worlds. Sarah was shy at first, but her curiosity always won. She asked endless questions, and Elias answered patiently. Sometimes she would laugh at his stories about Earth, about rain that smelled like soil, about music played by real instruments, about children running in fields without fear of telepathic judgment. "Your world sounds messy," she said one afternoon as they sat under a glowing tree in the palace garden. "It is," Elias admitted, smiling. "But it's alive. Maybe beauty isn't supposed to be perfect." Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "You think imperfection is beautiful?" "Sometimes it's the only thing that feels real." She smiled faintly, looking down at her hands. "I wish more of my people thought that way." He glanced at her aura, faint but steady. "Maybe they will," he said. "They just need to see what I see." But outside their quiet moments, tension was growing. The royal court was divided. Some nobles supported Elias's presence, saying the human alliance could bring new strength. Others whispered that he was a danger, that his influence over the dim princess was unnatural. In secret meetings, Lyra listened to those whispers. Her pride burned. All her life she had been adored, praised, and envied. But ever since the humans' arrival, her name had been spoken less. The people now talked about Sarah, the quiet sister, the one who had never mattered. Lyra's golden aura flickered faintly with anger. One night, Elias and Sarah stood on the palace balcony, watching the twin moons rise. The city below shimmered like a sea of light. "I think I'm beginning to understand your world," Elias said quietly. "And what do you see?" Sarah asked. "Perfection," he said, "but also loneliness. Everyone shines so brightly that they forget to look at the stars beside them." Sarah's breath caught. "That's very true," he smiled. "Maybe humans can remind you that light doesn't have to compete. It can share." For a moment they stood in silence, watching the night sky. The faint hum of the city below mixed with the whisper of wind through crystal leaves. Sarah turned to him suddenly. "Elias, and why did you really choose me? You could have had anyone, even Lyra." He looked at her, his expression calm but sincere. "Because when I saw you, you weren't trying to be seen. You were just being yourself, and that's something rare, anywhere in the galaxy." Her eyes shimmered softly in the moonlight. "You make me feel as if being different isn't wrong." "It's not," Elias said quietly. "It's the reason you matter." For the first time, Sarah laughed softly, the sound pure and warm. And as she laughed, the faint blue light around her grew brighter, just enough for Elias to notice he didn't mention it. But deep down he knew something was beginning to change. In a world that worshipped light, a quiet glow had started to rise. And for the first time in her life, Princess Sarah was not invisible. The morning after the binding ceremony, the palace of Veralia was alive with whispers. Across the city, citizens and courtiers alike marveled at the human and the once ignored princess. Their bond had become more than symbolic. It had become a testament to what could happen when courage and empathy intertwined, but not everyone celebrated. Princess Lyra paced her private chambers, her golden aura flickering with a storm of emotions. Pride, envy, and frustration battled within her. She had been the star of the Varelian Empire for as long as she could remember. Everyone admired her. Everyone obeyed her. Yet here was a human, a fragile, ordinary human, who had chosen her quieter sister. Worse, that choice had brought Sarah light, respect, and admiration. Lyra clenched her fists. "They'll regret this," she whispered. "Humans may think they understand us, but they have no idea how dangerous tradition can be." Meanwhile, Elias and Sarah began their first joint mission, a diplomatic tour across the outer colonies of Virelia. Their task was simple but critical: assess resources, strengthen alliances, and demonstrate the bond between Earth and Virelia. At first, the journey seemed smooth. Sarah walked confidently beside Elias, her aura bright and steady. Citizens waved, diplomats bowed, and many began to murmur in approval at the unusual pair. Yet tension grew with every mile. During their third day on the planet Zerath, they arrived at a mining colony threatened by political unrest. Rebels opposed the new human alliance, claiming that Earth's influence would weaken Virelia. Elias studied the colony carefully. The humans had trained him well in negotiation and risk assessment, but this was the first time he faced a situation where diplomacy alone might fail. Sarah noticed the unease in the workers' minds. Her empathic gift had grown stronger after the binding. She could sense fear, anger, and suspicion vibrating through the crowd like invisible waves. "They don't trust me," Sarah whispered. "They don't trust either of us yet," Elias said, his voice calm. "That's okay. Trust is earned, not given." They walked through the settlement together, Sarah quietly observing while Elias spoke with leaders. The humans called it patience. The Varelians called it unusual, and for Sarah it felt natural. Suddenly, a sharp alarm rang across the colony. The rebels had launched a strike. Not a battle of weapons, but a sabotage of energy conduits threatening to shut down the colony entirely. Chaos erupted. Citizens screamed as machines whirred and sparks flew. The Varelian guards hesitated, unsure how to act without causing panic. Elias moved instinctively. He grabbed a falling child, ducked under a sparking beam, and guided the workers to safety. His actions were simple, human, and direct. No aura, no psychic commands, just courage and logic. Sarah's powers flared. She felt the fear of everyone in the colony as if it were her own. Normally, her aura alone could not influence machines or stop attacks, but now, strengthened by the human bond, she could stabilize faint energy fluctuations. She concentrated, and slowly, the sparks around the critical conduits dimmed, preventing a catastrophic meltdown. The crowd gasped. Workers stared at her. Even the Varelian guards whispered in awe. Elias looked at her, eyes wide with amazement. "You did that," he said softly. Sarah shook her head. "No. We did it. Together." In that moment, the human and the dim princess were no longer two beings from different worlds. They were a single force, a bond that could change outcomes, challenge expectations, and inspire courage. Back in the capital, news of the incident spread quickly. Lyra listened to the reports in silence, her golden aura dimming with frustration. Not only had her sister survived, but she had saved lives, with the human by her side. The court could no longer ignore Sarah, and worse, they could no longer ignore Elias. Lyra's pride hardened. "If they can show courage, so can I," she whispered. "I will remind everyone why I am the true princess of Varelia." But her ambition blinded her to danger. She formed alliances with nobles who resented the human's influence, plotting behind closed doors. Their plan was simple but cruel: discredit Sarah, undermine Elias, and weaken the human-Varelian alliance before it could grow stronger. Meanwhile, Elias and Sarah returned to the capital, unaware of the storm brewing. Their successes on the colonies had made them more visible than ever, and their growing bond was undeniable. Citizens began leaving messages of support. Small protests in favor of their leadership began to appear in public forums. Sarah, once timid and overlooked, had become a symbol of courage, patience, and empathy. She felt the weight of expectation, yet she also felt alive for the first time. Elias noticed the change. "You're shining," he said quietly as they walked through the palace garden. "And it's not just the aura. You carry yourself differently. You believe in yourself," Sarah smiled softly. "I think it helps to have someone who believes in me." "And that someone will always be me," Elias replied with a firm, gentle voice, "but peace is fragile." Late that night, as Sarah slept in her chamber, a whisper of energy brushed her mind. Subtle, alien, and wrong. She sat upright, aura glowing faintly, sensing movement in the palace corridors. Someone had entered. Not the guards, not a servant. Someone was watching. Her heart raced. She woke Elias quietly, and together they moved to the observation balcony. Below, shadows flitted across the palace grounds. "They're trying to harm us," Sarah whispered, fear and determination mixing in her voice. Elias nodded. "Then we stopped them, together." With that, they descended to the lower halls, careful and silent. Sarah's aura now acted like a shield, alerting them to every presence. Elias relied on instinct and human courage, moving through the palace with precision and focus. They caught the intruders in the chamber where the energy crystals were stored. To their surprise, the attackers were not ordinary thieves or rebels. They were Varelian nobles, loyal to Lyra, who sought to disrupt the alliance by sabotaging the human-princess bond. The confrontation was tense. The nobles demanded that Sarah step aside, that Elias leave Varelia, and that the alliance be broken. Elias stepped forward, calm but firm. "You are wrong. She belongs here, and so do I. If you want change, you will face it with courage, not sabotage." Sarah, strengthened by her own awakening, stepped beside him. Her aura blazed gently, not as bright as Lyra's, but warmer, steadier, stronger than anyone had expected. Together, human and princess, they forced the conspirators to retreat. No one was harmed, but the message was clear. The bond between Elias and Sarah was more than ceremony. It was action, courage, and truth. The next morning, the king addressed the court. His tone was serious but proud. "Yesterday, we witnessed courage, loyalty, and unity from those who were least expected. Princess Sarah and Captain Ward have proven that true strength is not in aura alone, but in heart, mind, and spirit. Let this be a lesson to all. The galaxy changes, and those who refuse to change will be left behind. Lyra stood silently, her golden light flickering with shame and anger. For the first time, she realized that she could not simply rely on her natural gifts. She would have to earn respect through action, or risk losing it entirely. Sarah, standing beside Elias, felt a rush of pride and relief. She had faced doubt, fear, and judgment, yet she had survived and grown. Her aura shone steadily now, a symbol not of superficial brilliance but of real strength. Elias placed a hand gently on hers. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood tall even when everyone else doubted you." Sarah looked up at him, eyes shining. "We did it," she said. "Together." And in that moment, the palace of Virelia, and perhaps the galaxy itself, began to understand that light was not always what everyone expected. In the shadows, Lyra silently vowed to prove herself. But for now, the human and the dim princess had won the first victory, not through brilliance, beauty, or power, but through courage, empathy, and unyielding trust, and the rising storm was far from over. The palace of Virelia awoke to a day unlike any before. Word of the binding ceremony's success had spread across the empire, reaching even the farthest colonies and space stations. People whispered of the human Captain Elias Ward and the once overlooked Princess Sarah, a pair whose courage and unity had become the talk of the galaxy. For Sarah, the morning felt surreal. She stood on the balcony of her chambers, gazing at the rising twin suns, a warmth in her chest she had never felt before. Her aura pulsed steadily, not as bright as her sister's once perfect glow, but warmer, stronger, and alive. She had grown into a presence all her own. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Elias's voice came from behind her. She turned and smiled. "It's brighter than I expected," Elias chuckled softly. "The galaxy seems to shine differently when you see it with courage." She shook her head in disbelief. "I never thought I'd have this kind of confidence." "You earned it," he said simply. "Not because of me, not because of the binding, but because you believed you could." Sarah's heart swelled. It had been a long journey, from the shadows of doubt and insignificance to a light recognized across the empire. And she knew deep in her heart that this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, in the grand halls of the capital, Princess Lyra's pride had shifted into a quiet reflection. She walked through corridors where whispers followed her. Whispers of admiration for Sarah, of the human's bravery, of a bond stronger than tradition itself. Lyra paused before a mirror, her golden aura flickering slightly. She had been taught all her life that beauty and aura were the marks of strength. Yet now she understood that courage, empathy, and honesty carried a light far more powerful. Her sister had shown her that. The day's first meeting was a formal audience with the king, who had called for all high nobles and diplomats to witness a historic declaration. Elias and Sarah entered the chamber together. Their hands brushed briefly, saw the subtle sign of unity, trust, and shared purpose. The king rose from his throne, his deep voice resonating through the hall. "Citizens of Virelia, representatives of the colonies, and ambassadors from Earth, today we witness a moment that may change the course of our empire. Captain Elias Ward, a human, and Princess Sarah, once overlooked and doubted, have proven that courage, empathy, and partnership define true strength. Let this day mark the beginning of a new era, one where light is not measured by appearance but by heart." The audience erupted in applause. Courtiers and citizens alike stood cheering and waving. Even those who had doubted Elias and Sarah could not deny the truth. The human and the dim princess had reshaped expectations. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She looked at Elias, who smiled reassuringly. "We did it together," he whispered. "Yes," she replied softly. "Together." After the ceremony, the king called them to a private audience. "You have inspired not just your people, but all who watch from afar," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Captain Ward, you have shown the strength of humanity. Princess Sarah, you have shown the strength within yourself. And together you have shown the galaxy the power of unity." Sarah bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, it is an honor to serve our people alongside Elias." "And Captain Ward," the king added, "you are welcome in Virelia as one of our own. Your courage is remembered and your place here is secured." Elias bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will do my best to honor your trust." The news spread beyond the palace. Across colonies, space stations, and even distant planets, messages arrived congratulating the pair. Some were simple notes of admiration, others declarations of support. Humanity's reputation as a bold, unpredictable, and capable species had grown, and Sarah had become a symbol of hope for those who were quiet, overlooked, or underestimated. Even Lyra could not ignore the truth. She watched as citizens approached Sarah, offering smiles and words of encouragement. For the first time, she realized that respect could not be demanded by birth or aura. It had to be earned through action. Lyra stood silently in the shadows, her pride now tempered by reflection. She could no longer rely on her aura alone. If she wanted to shine truly, she would have to grow, learn, and earn trust in ways her sister had. The following weeks brought new challenges. Elias and Sarah traveled together across the outer colonies, witnessing poverty, injustice, and rebellion. Together they solved disputes, guided trade negotiations, and even diffused a potential military conflict between two minor worlds. Everywhere they went, Sarah's calm empathy and Elias's human courage worked in tandem. While the Virelians initially doubted the effectiveness of a human without aura, Elias's ingenuity and quick thinking proved indispensable. And Sarah's gift, heightened by their bond, allowed her to sense hidden tensions, heal misunderstandings, and connect with people on a level no one else could reach. It was a partnership built on respect, trust, and mutual reliance, the essence of true HFY spirit. Back on Virelia, life gradually shifted. Courtiers who had once scoffed at Sarah began to seek her counsel. Citizens admired her bravery and wisdom. Children across the empire whispered her name as they played, imagining themselves standing strong beside humans or aliens, proving that even the quietest light could shine brightly. Elias watched all this with quiet pride. "You've changed everything," he said one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. The twin moons reflected in the water like scattered stars. Sarah smiled softly. "No, we've changed things together. Without you, I might never have realized my own strength. You already had it," he said. "I just helped you see it." Her gaze met his, steady and sure. "And I will not forget it." As the seasons passed, their partnership grew stronger. Diplomatic alliances solidified, trade flourished, and cultural exchanges blossomed. The Human-Earth alliance was no longer seen as a novelty or a curiosity. It was a cornerstone of galactic cooperation. Lyra, quietly observing from her own chambers, began to train herself in new ways. She studied diplomacy, practiced humility, and slowly, ever so slowly, began to shine with a light of her own making, one earned, not inherited. Even she could not deny the inspiration that Sarah and Elias had brought. One evening, as the stars stretched endlessly above Virelia, Elias and Sarah stood on the balcony overlooking the capital. "The galaxy is changing," Sarah said quietly, "and I feel like we're part of that change." Elias nodded. "We are, and we're not alone. Humanity and Virelia. Together we can face anything." Sarah looked at him, her eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. "Do you really think people can see beyond appearances? Beyond aura and beauty?" "I do," Elias said firmly. "They just need someone to show them. Someone to remind them that courage, honesty, and heart are stronger than light alone." She smiled, a bright and steady smile that could rival the glow of any aura. "Then we'll be those people." Elias took her hand gently. "Yes, together." And as the twin moons rose higher in the sky, their hands clasped and hearts linked, it was clear to all who could see. Sometimes, the brightest light is not the one everyone notices, but the one chosen, nurtured, and believed in. The human had chosen the ignored one, and in doing so, he had revealed something that no galaxy had seen before: the quiet strength of humanity, the courage of the overlooked, and the power of bonds built on trust and respect. For Princess Sarah, the journey from shadows to light had finally arrived. For Elias, humanity's place among the stars had been affirmed. And for the galaxy, a new story had begun, one where the heart mattered more than appearance, where courage was admired above brilliance, and where the light that chose its own path could shine brighter than any other. And so, together, hand in hand, the human and the once ignored princess walked forward into the future, a future they would shape, side by side, leaving a legacy of hope, unity, and the enduring spirit of HFY. The palace of Virelia glittered under the twin moons, but inside its bright walls not everyone was at peace. Ever since the human Captain Elias Ward had chosen Princess Sarah as his diplomatic partner, the balance of the royal court had quietly shifted. Some nobles avoided them, some mocked them, and others simply watched, waiting to see what would happen next. But Elias and Sarah didn't let the whispers stop them. They had work to do. Each morning they met in the Hall of Knowledge, a great circular room filled with floating symbols and glowing crystal tables. There they discussed the new alliance, trade, technology, culture, and peace agreements between Earth and Virelia. Sarah was nervous at first. She had never been trusted with such important matters. Yet with every meeting, Elias made her feel seen. He didn't rush her when she spoke. He listened, asked questions, and encouraged her to share her ideas. One morning, as she explained a trade route map, her voice trembled slightly. "You're doing fine," Elias said quietly. "You know this better than anyone." She looked up, surprised. "You really think so?" "I don't think," he said with a small smile. "I know." Something in his steady tone made her heart calm. She looked down again, her fingers tracing the glowing lines on the table. For the first time in her life, she believed her voice mattered. That afternoon, they visited the Science Quarter, a place where Virelian engineers studied energy, aura frequencies, and telepathic resonance. The head scientist, Master Relin, greeted them politely but with visible curiosity. "So," Raylan said, peering at Elias, "you are the human who sees light differently." Elias chuckled softly. "That seems to be what people say." The scientist turned to Sarah. "And you are the dim one who now glows brighter." Sarah looked startled. I'm not sure what you mean." Relin gestured to a scanner that displayed a soft blue light. "Your aura is changing, Princess. It's stronger now, more stable. We've been observing it for days. When the human is near, your resonance increases by almost 30%. Elias blinked. 30%? Relin nodded. "It's unheard of. Normally, only another Virelian's aura could enhance another's. Yet your energy seems to interact directly with hers." Sarah's eyes widened. "But how is that possible?" "Humans have no aura." Raylan smiled slightly. "Maybe that's exactly why it works. Your energy isn't matching his, it's responding to it. Perhaps his emotional patterns create a form of stability your mind connects with." Elias scratched his chin. "So you're saying empathy might be stronger than telepathy?" The scientist laughed softly. "Perhaps. Or maybe humans and Virelians complete each other in unexpected ways." Sarah looked at Elias, her eyes full of quiet wonder. For the first time, her weakness with her faint aura wasn't something broken. It was something unique, something that made her different in a way that mattered. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, people in the palace began to see a change. Wherever Elias and Sarah went, they carried a quiet harmony with them. The guards treated her with new respect. The servants whispered that her aura seemed to glow more gently now, like the dawn rising after night. Even the king noticed. One evening he called them both to the Garden of Echoes, where silver flowers opened only at twilight. "My daughter," he said to Sarah, his deep voice calm but thoughtful. "You have grown." Sarah bowed her head slightly. "I have only done my duty, father." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You have done more than that. You have shown courage in the face of judgment. I am proud." Her eyes widened. It was the first time he had ever said those words to her. Then he turned to Elias. "And you, Captain Ward. You have earned the respect of many, though not all. You remind us that worth cannot always be measured in light." Elias bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That's all I ever hoped to show." The king studied him for a moment longer. "Still, be careful. Some in this court do not welcome change." The warning proved true. Later that night, Elias noticed shadows moving differently in the halls. Guards who once greeted him warmly now averted their gaze. Messages arrived late. Meetings were quietly rescheduled. Someone was trying to isolate them. Sarah sensed it too. Her empathic gift, once faint, had grown stronger. She could now feel tension in the air, the quiet unease of minds nearby. "They're afraid," she told Elias one night as they worked on a treaty document. "Afraid of what?" "Of what we represent," she said. "If humans and Virelians can truly connect, the old ways will lose power. Some won't let that happen easily." Elias leaned back in his chair, Then we'll show them we're stronger together. The next day, they were summoned to a large council meeting. The grand chamber was filled with high nobles, glowing banners, and the royal advisors. Among them stood Princess Lyra, her golden aura bright as ever, perhaps brighter. She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sister," she said smoothly, "I hear your light grows stronger each day." "How wonderful," Sarah nodded politely. "Thank you, Lyra." "And Captain Ward," Lyra continued, turning toward him. "Your presence has certainly brought excitement. Some might say too much." Elias met her gaze calmly. "Change often looks like chaos at first." Lyra's smile faded slightly. "Or like danger." Before more could be said, the king entered and called the meeting to order. They discussed the new alliance, the exchange of culture, and the next step, the binding ceremony. A symbolic event that would link the energy of both representatives before the eyes of the Empire. When Elias and Sarah were announced as the participants, a few nobles protested quietly. "A human cannot survive the binding," one said. "It is meant for beings with aura," but Elias only smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I'll just have to be the first." The king raised a hand for silence. "The binding will proceed. If humanity is to stand beside us, it must begin here." Lyra's expression tightened, though she bowed respectfully. "As you wish, Father." Later that evening, Elias and Sarah sat in the quiet of the garden once more. The moonlight painted her face in soft silver light. "You shouldn't have agreed," Sarah said, worry in her voice. "The binding could harm you. Your body isn't made for aura energy." Elias smiled gently. "You forget something. Humans have survived far worse. We adapt." She shook her head. "You always say that as if it's simple." "It's not simple," he said, "but it's who we are. We fall, we learn, and we rise again." Sarah looked at him for a long time. "You really believe that, don't you?" He nodded. "Completely." A soft breeze passed through the garden, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. For the first time, Sarah reached out her hand. Hesitant at first, she placed it gently over his. "I don't want you to get hurt," she said quietly. He looked at her hand, delicate, glowing faintly blue, resting on his own. "Then I'll just have to make sure I don't," he said with a grin. Sarah smiled back, though her eyes were bright with emotion. In the following days, preparation for the binding began. Scientists measured aura levels, priests chanted ancient hymns, and energy crystals were aligned around the chamber of light. It was said that once joined in the binding, both participants would share a fraction of each other's essence. Elias trained for the event under strict observation. The process was dangerous for any non-telepathic being, but he refused to step back. When Sarah tried to convince him again, he only said, "If we want this alliance to mean something, I can't ask others to risk what I'm not willing to." That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the stars and thinking of the strange human who had changed everything. For so long she had been the quiet one in the shadows, ignored and pitied. But now, because of him, she felt alive. She felt seen. She whispered to the stars, "Please protect him." And as if the universe was listening, her aura pulsed softly, brighter than ever before. On the morning of the binding, the whole capital gathered to watch. The great chamber was filled with light, the sound of 1,000 voices humming softly in unison. The king sat upon his throne, watching as Elias and Sarah stepped into the circle together. Lyra stood nearby, her golden light dim with something darker, jealousy and regret. As the ritual began, beams of energy swirled around them, connecting heart to heart, mind to mind. The human and the dim princess stood hand in hand, surrounded by radiance. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, to everyone's shock, the blue light around Sarah exploded outward, bright, strong, alive, and Elias remained standing, calm and steady beside her. The crowd gasped. The human hadn't just survived, he had amplified her light. And from that day forward, whispers began to spread not about the dim princess, but about the bright bond between the human and the one no one had ever chosen.